Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 43. We're covering Hellblazer, John Constantine. Not Constantine. Constantine, not Constantinople. Yes, it's Constantine.
Nice.
As soon as we started writing this episode and preparing for it, I knew I was going to have to make a They Might Be Giants reference. Also, side note, am I the only one who hears that song and thinks of Tiny Toons? I know I'm absolutely dating myself.
No, that's what I think too, as well as Triangle Man.
Yes. Triangle Man, Triangle. What the hell is Person Man? That was the only one I never understood from that song. What is Person Man? What is Person Man supposed to be?
He's the greatest man. That's all you need to know.
I don't think... I don't agree with that.
It's in the song. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, but I still don't agree with it.
Oh, well, it's not my fault you have bad taste.
Anywho, want to give another thank you again from last week's guest voice, Janae Herring. Thank you so much for your fantastic job as Monica. I greatly appreciate the work and the guest appearance that you put in. But this week, it's back to me voicing the character. And the fun thing is this week I get to do a Liverpudlian accent, so that's going to be quite entertaining.
I'm so grateful that you're able to do that, because I don't know who else we would get to do something like that.
Well, it's not exactly like I can call up the Beatles and ask them to guest on our podcast. I'm not really sure that Paul or Ringo are even aware of what it is that we do, who we are. I don't think I can ask them. That's the point I'm making, but... in any case, it's going to be a lot of fun.
All right.
As always, we have our shout out of the week, and this time it's a newer podcast. I want to give a shout out and hello to Freudian Sips, Bonnie and Anna, a mother-daughter duo. They drink wine and they talk about brains, psychology, and basically all manner of interesting topics. And I love the fact that one of their episodes is called The Young and the Restless.
That's fantastic.
As soon as I saw that, I go, okay, this is something that I'm definitely going to be interested in listening to. So I will add that the show is very much not safe for work. There is absolutely profanity. So you just want to keep that in mind while you're listening. But they are available at freudiansipspod.com. So you can check them out, give them a shout out and follow on Twitter and all of the social media platforms and whatever version of the show that you want to listen to, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, what have you. Make sure you follow them, leave them a nice rating and review. And as well, while you're doing that, if you could also do the same for us, we'd appreciate that. That would be very kind of you to leave a rating and review, because if you leave us a positive rating and review, we will read it aloud on the show. So before we get started in the comics discussion about Constantine, Doc, did you see the Constantine movie with Keanu Reeves?
Yes, I did. I thought it was okay, and there were certain story arcs that they took directly from the comics. It's a mismatch, and it's Keanu Reeves, so there's some limitations there. But I thought they did a good job representing things. I'll say that it has much more of a Christian bent as opposed to the general magic and occult comic version, but I think they also knew the audience they had to speak to, so I can't really blame them for the directions they went.
I have a strange feeling. Did we watch this together? Was it at Angela's house?
I don't remember that. I'll be honest with you. I know I saw it once on a plane trip.
Yeah, that was definitely not us. You and I have never been on a plane together.
Right. So I don't know.
I could swear that we saw this at my ex-girlfriend Angela's house.
Maybe. I don't know. During
one of our many MST3K let's watch a terrible movie and mock the hell out of it nights.
Possibly. I honestly don't remember that.
Okay. I'm not saying it did or didn't happen. I'm just saying that for whatever reason, I seem to recall seeing this with you, or if nothing else, seeing it at her house.
It may have been on TV, but I'm not sure we specifically were looking to watch it. I just don't remember. I'm sorry.
As opposed to, say, Mighty P. Kingman, which we intentionally saw, or that horrible one with Michael Jackson and the island.
Yeah, as Agent MJ or whatever. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
I do miss those days, but I digress. John Constantine. And again, in the comics, it's pronounced Constantine. I know everybody tends to pronounce it Constantine, but it's specifically stated in the comics that, although on the show, because now he's Matt Ryan, not to be confused with the Falcons quarterback. I fucking hate the Falcons. Not to be confused with him. The Welsh actor Matt Ryan portrays him in the Arrowverse, and they call him Constantine. So I want to say why. But anyway, this is all rambling. I apologize. John Constantine, created by the legendary Alan Moore and artists Steve Bissette and John Totleben in the Saga of Swamp Thing number 37 from June 1985. John Constantine was originally designed by the artist to look like Sting because they were big fans of the Police. So they created this very clearly British character, and they drew him to look like one Gordon Sumner. And although visually he's moved away from looking like Sting, I would still advise you don't stand too close to him.
Oh, you beat me to it.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
I guess it's synchronicity.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about Constantine. He started off as a DC character, but he shifted to the Vertigo imprint in 1993 and was actually one of the first Vertigo comics available. And he essentially stayed for over 20 years in Vertigo with very, very few appearances in the mainstream DC universe until the New 52 combined DC and Vertigo universes into one coherent universe. And although he's currently now in the DC universe, there is still some portion, I guess, of the Vertigo character that is, I don't want to say separate necessarily, but maybe an alternate timeline. We know how DC likes to have their alternate universes, because in the Vertigo universe, he ages in real time.
Yeah.
As opposed to your average comic book character, which, and we've referenced this in other episodes, comic books are maybe, I think, about every 6 months or so of our time is like a week in comic book time.
Yeah. And if you've seen any of his appearances in the New 52, you realize they kind of dropped that part of the character for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know why. Probably because it was going to be too difficult. The story, the reason that they said that he continues to age in real time is based on some of the deals that he's made with demons. But I digress. So John Constantine was born in very tragic circumstances. He was born as a sole surviving twin. He inadvertently strangled his twin brother in the womb with his own umbilical cord. So that's bad enough. And then the birth also killed his mother. So his father resented him for killing the mother because she was pregnant with twins. So there's 3 people involved in that, and one of them lives.
Oh, wow. I don't think I need to explain how that's going to affect someone's upbringing.
I don't think you need to have any training in psychiatry or psychology to understand that that's definitely going to have an impact on a person. So as he gets older, he discovers he is the latest in a long family line of mages known as laughing magicians. And they're called laughing magicians because they like to really mess with demons. So this is just a family trait of Constantine's. So he ran away from home after he botched a curse on his father that left him frail. He moves to London in 1969, gets involved with the occult, and starts a punk rock band called Mucous Membrane.
I am so impressed with a band name because think about it. On one hand, you get the unsophisticated audience because it sounds gross. Mucus. Meanwhile, that's actually the proper terminology for many of the interactive points within our own bodies. So it's actually a very sophisticated term. So you get both sides being able to appreciate a band name. That's great marketing.
And they wrote a song that ended up being recorded in our universe. I forget the name of the song. I did not write it down in our show notes, but I will see if I can find it on YouTube, and I will post a link to it on the show notes on the website so that you can listen to what John Constantine and his friends sang. He also ends up in a relationship with Zatanna Zatara, who's another one of DC's most famous magicians, although it was revealed that he's also bisexual. So in addition to Zatanna, he does have relationships with men. I know in the comics at one point he gets married to a woman, but he is bisexual. And as certainly at the time, one of the few bisexual characters in comics. I think even to this day, there are not that many characters who are not heterosexual. And of those that are not explicitly heterosexual, the overwhelming majority of them are homosexual. So it is very rare that you have a bisexual comic book character. So kudos to the writers. That was revealed later on in his creation. That wasn't Alan Moore's necessarily involvement.
I'd like to say kudos that in and of itself is not treated as an issue, because there is the temptation to make that itself a major story arc, et cetera, and they never did that. And I greatly appreciate the restraint on the part of whoever has been writing this for so long.
Yes, absolutely. Bisexuality is not obviously an issue. It's not even anything we're really going to address in the issues portion. We are going to address his relationships, be they male or female, but because John has the issues, but his bisexuality is not the source of the problem. It's just who he is as a person outside of his sexuality. So his first act of heroism, he attempts to save a young girl who's under assault from a demon. He conjures another demon, but he doesn't do it exactly correct, and it ends up taking the girl to hell.
Well, sometimes mistakes happen, and you end up with irrevocable consequences. Wait, what? That's not how that's supposed to work. Oh, my goodness.
No, it's definitely not. So the demon Negral, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, becomes one of his recurring antagonists. He later meets Swamp Thing, which is where we first encounter him, is in the Swamp Thing comics, and he helps teach Swamp Thing to become a little more powerful. He's one of John's longest friends. The Swamp Thing, Alec Holland, actually possesses John's body so that John can make love to Alec's wife, Alec being the Swamp Thing, so that Swamp Thing can have a daughter. It's technically biologically John's because Swamp Thing cannot reproduce in his current form, but he possesses John's body and allows him that connection with his wife.
Wow.
That's beyond just surrogacy or sperm donation. That's really doing someone a solid.
Spiritual surrogate father. Yeah, that's a bit above even my pay grade.
That is going out there. I mean, you and I are very good friends, but no.
Nah.
No. Nope. There's a line. There's a line, and we're going to stay on. Right. I stay on my side of the line. You stay on your side of the line.
Yep. Not happening.
Nope. Not even touching that one. So we don't plan everything, folks. So John is a chain smoker, and this is one of the things that I think was addressed very well in the movie. One of the few things that I would say was addressed very well in the movie. And so he contracts lung cancer. And this is where we see John really as a con man. And this is something that occurs throughout his portrayals as a character. He first off tricks one demon into drinking holy water. So because the demon was supposed to possess the soul of one of his friends, except he tricks the demon into drinking holy water, which renders the demon essentially helpless and powerless so that they can't take the soul. So now they're pissed off at John and they want his soul. Well, John sells his soul to another demon. So now the one who's really upset at him would have to fight the other demon who actually owns his soul once he dies, and he pits them against each other. Rather than fight over this, the demons say, you know what? We're just going to cure the cancer because neither one of us want to deal with you when you get to hell, and we don't want to start this big fight.
Right. Think of the idea of a holy war, except instead of heaven versus hell, it's a hell battle royale. And that type of damage would just simply make them too weak if heaven decided to take over everything. So
it's an unholy war, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Is Kenny there controlling it on his PSP?
Oh, my goodness. You know, it's been a while since we made a South Park reference.
It has been a while since we made a South Park reference, and it's been a very long time since that episode even aired. I mean, we're going back almost about 10 years, I would say.
Yeah, the gold PSP, I remember.
The golden PSP. Oh my God, this is an amazing battle. This is way better than Lord of the Rings.
Oh, wow.
So like that, but in hell.
Yep.
Not only does John mess with demons, he blackmails God to keep his soul out of hell. Because he tells God, if I make it to hell, you know I'm going to end up taking over. And once I do that, I'm just going to release the demons. I'm going to lock them out of hell. And I'm not really going to care about what happens. And God realizes, I cannot allow this person to go to hell. So your soul cannot be damned under any circumstances. So John has basically blackmailed God into guaranteeing himself a seat into heaven. That is ballsy.
Yeah, somehow I don't think at some point things are going to work out exactly as he planned, because that's boring writing, first of all, but also because none of this ever seems to go perfectly according to plan for any of the agents involved. It doesn't matter what their power is, but just an observation.
So he tries and fails to save his sister's soul from hell. She ends up making a deal because her husband kills her and she ends up in hell. He goes to hell to try and rescue her soul. It doesn't work. The demons get one over on him, and this really eats at him because his sister was a very innocent person. She was a good person, someone that he looked up to as basically his sister Cheryl, as basically someone that showed John that there is another way. And she still ended up in hell because she chose to stay in hell as a way to prevent further punishment for her husband, even though he killed her. She was that good of a person that she would stay in hell to prevent further punishment for her husband. That is dedication. That's love.
Yeah, I don't know how you go beyond that.
So that ate at John for quite some time. So then, as we referenced earlier, the Vertigo universe gets remerged into the DC universe in the New 52 storyline. And there are some small changes to his backstory because they introduce him to a wider audience that may not have been reading Hellblazer since 1993. So there's some minor changes to his backstory, but his personality essentially remains the same. He's still chain-smoking, cynical, kind of a dick. He's still bisexual. So he gets transported to Earth 2 because, again, this being DC, there are multiple Earths, and he cooperates with that world's version of himself until they discover that the only way to save Earth 2 is one of them has to die.
Right. And to clarify, the Earth 2 version of John does many of the things that we would picture a hero doing with those types of powers. And that's the way that the people around him, including his family, who are still alive, view him at the time.
Yes, Earth 2 John Constantine is a real hero. He very much embraces that role. He's a good person, nowhere near the kind of cynical misanthrope that our, I guess, Earth 0 Constantine is. And they realize someone has to die in order to save Earth 2. So our John kills the good John. And this annoys everybody. And then Darkseid shows up. And he manages to trick Darkseid and still save a large number of survivors.
Even going so far as to go back into what he made Darkseid believe was a barren universe and continue to save people. So, yay, I guess.
To him, it was a matter of someone had to die in order to save an entire universe and to save all of these people. And Earth 2 John was not really comfortable making that call. Earth 0 John was. And again, we don't try and delve too much into the weeds, but the point is that Earth 0 John, or I guess the main main version of John, for all the cynicism that he exudes, and he exudes a lot of cynicism, is still a good person underneath it all and can do heroic things in the right circumstances.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know, Doc, there's an expression that you use all the time about scratching a cynic.
Yeah, the way I've always said it, and I did not come up with this, but shortened version, scratch a cynic and you'll realize that they're a wounded idealist. So there's a certain way the world is, and the cynic comments on that. But underneath that, they know that there's some good and something that they want to see in the world that they don't. And that's where a lot of their frustration comes from.
Yes. So moving into the issues now, the first thing that I want to talk about, and it relates to that cynicism, and I guess it's a symptom of the cynicism, certainly not a cause, but he has difficulty keeping close relationships of any kind with people. Most of his friends are casual acquaintances, let's say. There was one, Chaz Chandler is one of his longest serving friends, and I'm always entertained because Chaz's wife does not like John at all, and she's constantly yelling at Chaz, why are you even friends with this guy? But they've helped each other out quite a bit. Chaz is, I guess, the closest thing to a sidekick that it could be said that John has.
Yeah.
He drives him around in a taxi. He's a confidant, so to speak. But by and large, whether they're friendships, as we see again with Swamp Thing, or romantic relationships, John keeps people at a distance, and he believes that it's easier that way. Part of him believes that it's easier that way, and then part of him believes that people get bored of him, so he doesn't really try and go out of his way to keep them because they're just going to get bored of me, so why am I even going to bother trying? And that's a draining mindset to have. Whether you're a hero with mystical occult abilities or just your average Joe, it is very difficult to go through life alone. No man is an island, et cetera, et cetera. So, Doc, if you can talk a little bit about John's mindset and what leads a person to that, and then how they continue in the face of being alone consistently.
I'm actually going to reveal something about myself. Part of the reason why I liked the character John Constantine is for this reason, because I have to guard against this myself. The idea that life gets rough when it comes to dealing with people one-on-one and that nothing is going to be perfect is something that's easily explained to any rational human being. But there is a false level of comfort with the idea that as long as you keep things as superficial as possible with those you interact with, you don't even give the opportunity for some of those failings to show up. So if you meet someone for the first time, most of us have a decent gauge about first impressions, so we can determine if we want to continue to have conversations with someone. And from that point, we usually as humans want to establish deeper relationships, for the most part, one at a time. So it doesn't have to be intimate relationships like dating or anything of the sort. It can be making friends, having common hobbies, whatever the case may be. It's not exactly a surprise for me to say that you're not going to be that level of friend with everybody you meet. And I don't even know what the ratio is. It's going to be different for lots of different people. That ratio at times can get pretty low. In other words, if you're interacting with, let's say, 100 people at any given time period, you may only end up with 2 or 3 of those people becoming close, consistent interactions. Some people can't or don't want to face the idea that you're getting, quote unquote, 97% rejections. Even if they're not rejections, it's just the simple process of us going from one contact point to another naturally. So you end up creating a barrier. You can do this naturally. I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth. There are some traits of any one person's personality that are going to be considered negatives to other people. And those are going to come about just by having a typical conversation. To make it more personal, I can say my sense of humor often can be very morbid. If a person if a person is not expecting that and they're thrown off, then they'll probably not want to talk to me again about that. And that's fair.
For the record, when we were in high school, one of your life mottos and slogans was ready to die.
Correct. And I've even put that in one of the blog posts where, especially once I had a greater appreciation for mental health and suicidality and everything that entails, I stopped doing that. But I felt like I had to amplify, and this is what I was about to get to, I had to amplify the quirks of my personality and make them into actual shields so that I didn't have to utilize the mental energy and bandwidth to try and filter out who I needed to talk to at any given time. And I can tell you firsthand that I think that backfired on me on several occasions, because there are many good people out there that probably could have been much better friends, and I pushed them away because I thought it was much simpler to have walls up first and then slowly let people in. That's not necessary, but it ended up being my technique as an immature person. So I learned that through my training, and I've learned to identify it in others so that they don't take the same tact, hopefully. Some people will still do that because they may purposely want to limit their contacts because they have other aspects of their life they want to work on, be it their job, be it a hobby, be it their individual family, whatever the case may be. But in Constantine's situation, he can come up with every excuse in the world almost instantly because there are actual antagonists. He can just say he has to battle demons because he's actually battling demons. So that can eliminate most of the general population from the start. And then even amongst the heroes, villains, or whatever mishmash of characters that he's dealing with, when they notice something charming about him, he can embellish it to the point that they notice this is a bit much for me. And then he'll pull it back once they're at a distance to remind them this is why you liked me in the first place. So it's a very tenuous back and forth situation with everybody he meets, because he's also intelligent enough to know that he needs people in different circumstances because they may be able to help him, and he has to have that bond, but he doesn't want it to get so far as to him having to reciprocate that level of energy and interest. He'll enjoy it in the moment, but he doesn't make it so that it's his number one priority. And he'll go so far as to make sure that it's not the other person's number one priority either.
I remember your younger days.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I'm willing to say it because it's such a fascinating thing. If I was at a party and I didn't have any interest in any of the people around me, I have the perfect thing on me right now that would show what I would do. I would literally zip my head up so that you couldn't see my face, and I would sometimes fall asleep because I figured that was a better way to handle things than to be insulting, which I know I already was, but to yell, scream, or say this is stupid or this is ridiculous or whatever the case was, because that was a much more visceral way for people to get the hint.
Yeah, or you would take a napkin and put it over your face. I remember you did that at one party.
Yes.
You were sitting there and you just put the napkin over your face and just sat there, and everyone was kind of looking at you. And I was sitting next to you going, this is my best friend, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Sitting there with a napkin on his face.
Yep. Mind you, I do not do that anymore. I swear to you, I don't do that anymore. You don't have to believe me.
I was about to make a joke, but I believe you. So the next thing, and one of the things that I want to discuss, is his addiction, not only to nicotine, which is very obvious. And I know we covered nicotine addiction in large part in the J. Jonah Jameson episode, but he's an adrenaline junkie, and he thoroughly enjoys the dangerous and mysterious situations that he's in. And this is why one of the reasons why, even as a cynical person who is borderline misanthropic at times, I don't think he's legitimately misanthropic. I think, just as you were saying, just alluding to, it was easier for him to put on that facade that he's misanthropic and go from there. But that's why he constantly puts himself in these dangerous situations, because he thoroughly enjoys the rush of being the one who has to save everybody, because his back is against the wall. He's dealing with literal demons and angels.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I would say that a part of it that is more relatable to our audience is something that many of us do anyway, and we may not be cognizant of it. Procrastination. Some people, no matter what timeline you give, will continue to push the boundaries. And the reason for it is they want to have, as you so adeptly said, their backs against the wall. They want that extra motivation so that they can act. They want that extra pressure because in their mind, they may end up with unique results. I'm not going to say better results, because in the long term, that's not true. But for Constantine, who is not, let's make this clear, not a superior physical fighter, but goes to battle more than almost any other character that's not considered a mainline superhero, because he views all of these events with, in comics, very obvious threats. So he gets that opportunity. As humans, we really don't get as much of an opportunity unless you're in a war zone. But he's acclimated to it because he has a high level of skill in what he does. So what you or I may consider to be an overwhelming situation, for him, it's more or less become a walk in the park. So he has to constantly keep pushing the boundaries to get the same emotional response out of himself. So it's not just a matter of him, quote unquote, winning against demons or heckling them or anything of the sort after the first time. It's how do I make it unique? How do I make it more fun? And so whether he's conscious of it or not, usually he is, because he's a very smart man, he will put himself in situations where at some point something's going to happen. Something's going to go wrong, and he'll have to act on it in one way or another. It's kind of like people that chase storms. Anybody could tell you what's going to happen with a large storm. They know that. They know that they're taking a risk, but this one might be just a little different than the last one. Maybe the winds are stronger. Maybe it drops more torrential rain and there's flooding. Maybe it's massive amounts of electrical damage and they have to find some way to keep their equipment going. There's always variations. And these shows have become so prominent on, the different channels on cable and everything, Deadliest Catch, whatever. It's the idea that people make what we consider to be the extreme to be their mundane. And that level of control under chaos is something that, for many people, can't be matched any other way. The fact that it affects their nervous system to the point where they can remain in what's considered a relatively calm state is not a coincidence with how much many of them smoke. Because the nicotinic receptors in our nervous system have been studied for a long time for potential treatments, and so far has really come up bupkis, except for treating nicotine addiction itself. But the point remains, severe emotional responses and nicotine consumption are highly correlated. So I'm not pretending and saying we know exactly what's going on, but we know it's there. Correlation does not equal causality, but doggone it, this is something that's been around since nicotine was known as something you could ingest.
Yeah, I know my mother smoked for many, many years, and she said it helped with the stress. I know many people that I work with claim that they don't get a chance to relax unless and until they have a cigarette. It's something I've never tried. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, nor do I intend to at this point. But there definitely is a recurring element I see of stress relief among those friends of mine that are smokers. And I'm sure some of our listeners that are smokers can attest to it, that's the only thing that calms them down. And I find it, just from a physiological standpoint, to be sad and difficult that the only way that they feel that they can cope with the stress is by something that kills them. I understand from a chemical standpoint, as you said, nothing else really addresses those receptors other than nicotine. I hope that maybe someday science will come up with something that addresses it in a far less harmful fashion. Or, of course, the alternative is eliminate the stress in the first place and you reduce the need to smoke. That's the better solution. But failing that, coming up with an alternative, John seems to be, I'm going to smoke and also put myself in a situation where I have to negotiate with several demons who are trying to kill me. And then I feel okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
The last issue that I want to address, and it's something that you touched on very briefly earlier, John has magical abilities, but he chooses not to use them unless he absolutely has to. He would much rather get out of a situation using his wits. If he has to fight, he likes a gun. The magic is really just almost a last resort. And I don't know that we've seen too many characters that have the abilities that they use them only if they have to. I know we've talked about Jessica Jones and we talk about these heroes that didn't ask for these powers but used them. John, I think, is interesting and almost unique, at least from our experience in the episodes that we've done, in that it's not really about the magic for him. The magic is, if nothing else, a way for him to interject himself into these situations that a mere mortal wouldn't otherwise do. But he tends to get out of them using his mouth and his brain. And as I said, occasionally a gun. So he's not really hand to hand. He's not someone who uses the magic in addition to hand to hand, not like a Doctor Strange. You know, we've talked about Stephen Strange, that he's very big on the magic use. John likes to keep it in his back pocket. That's a very interesting use of his talent and abilities. So you can expound on that a little bit.
You mentioned Doctor Strange, and that's a perfect analogy because although I don't think it was as much of a curriculum as Doctor Strange would put it, where he has taken direct, intense focus to learn about an area, in this case, magic, and become incredibly proficient at it, and is willing to use it to its fullest ability, John Constantine, in a much more haphazard way, but at least in the comic universe, is just as proficient at knowing about these things and willing to use them if all else fails, has a different goal and objective despite the amount of time and effort put in to learn those skills in the first place. This is actually something that I think is incredibly prominent and much more prominent now than it used to be in society, because we have a whole generation now of people who have gone to college, have certain degrees, have taken the time to learn a certain subject so well that in theory they could spend their professional time doing that to earn money. And yet they end up in jobs totally, on the surface anyway, unrelated to those particular degrees. A lot of that had to do with just the general economy and finances and whatnot. But our lives don't wait for macroeconomics to work themselves out. So if you're in a bad spot, you do what you have to survive. So it may not have been out of choice. It may have purely been out of circumstance. But the point still stands. John has learned to enjoy that. he likes the idea of expanding his personal mental space by doing things differently than what he was trained to do. And I think that makes those skills, rather than erode because he doesn't always use them, it makes them more potent because he has learned how to identify the exact moments where he needs to utilize them. He doesn't use it as a crutch. That's not to disparage someone like a Doctor Strange who is using them on a consistent basis in most circumstances. It's just a different way of looking at things. So I'm not automatically saying that this is an issue for John. I'm just pointing out that overall, we may not be able to use our talents the way we originally wanted to. And it may be out of our control or it may be by choice. But either way, I think you can attain a balance in how you use your knowledge and the things you were trained to do, as well as natural abilities that may or may not be developed to their potential, as well as things that you literally don't know, because that's how expansive the world is. Those are going to change over time. There are going to be seasons of your life where you are using exactly what you were trained for. There are seasons of your life where that's going to be in the background. There are going to be seasons in your life where you're going to be doing something new where all your previous experience may not matter. But as long as you have the type of open mindset to try and let your brain adjust to those circumstances, you may find connections with previous skills and experience that you didn't imagine were there. And I think that's way more useful now than it has ever been. With the combination of technology, industrialization, automation, all the things that are going on right now, people are panicking about whether or not they have a purpose. And my answer to that is, of course you do. You just have to make sure you find it in a way that's going to allow you to continue to connect with other people. That's what John has mastered. It doesn't matter that he's a warlock compared to having any other superpower, compared to having any other education. It's the fact that he's willing to take the time to read and understand people. And although he doesn't always use it, quote unquote, for good, he certainly uses it way more than anything else. And that is never going away. Not as long as you or I are biological beings.
Huh. I mean, I definitely know that he has the I guess I don't want to say con man skills, although in some respects it is the con man skills. But so much of being a con man is, as you said, being able to read people. And that's something that he has used throughout the entire run of the character.
Yeah. Yeah. The best way I can describe this is when in the past this used to be used as an insult. When you interview for a job, they used to refer to things as soft skills, meaning you don't put them on your resume. But when you're talking to someone, there are certain parts of the interactions that you want to come out that you know are going to be beneficial in the long run. And the reason I say it used to be an insult, it used to be a situation where a potential employee only has those skills and therefore is not going to be able to do the job. More and more now, what I'm noticing is that you want those skills first because you know that those are much more difficult to master. And all of the other on-the-job material is fairly straightforward and simple. You want someone to be able to get the complex before the rote part of any employment. That's just an observation. I may be totally wrong about that. If there are any headhunters or human resource people that say, I don't know what I'm talking about, that's fair. That's your area of expertise. But I'm just giving that as an observation and dealing with certain patients that have been in situations where you wonder, no offense taken, I'm sorry, no offense meant, how on earth did you get in that position in the first place? Because your resume doesn't show it. But talking to them in person, it certainly does.
My sister always jokes that every job that she's had, or the majority of jobs that she's had, were created for her because on paper, she didn't have the skill set or the experience, those hard skills that you reference, to get the job. But she has the soft skills and the people management skills and the people understanding skills to be able to basically work anywhere. And that's a credit to her. That's something that I wish that I had to her level. So I'm certainly envious of her on that. So moving into the treatment, starting with in-universe, what would you tackle first? Would it be the distance? Would it be the addiction? Would it be, I don't think the soft skills necessarily is an issue, but maybe you could try and get him to shift that towards a situation where it's a little less application in dangerous situations. What would you go with first for Constantine?
This would be difficult because I'm going to give a spoiler here. This is also out of universe. When a person has created a certain worldview, it can be very challenging to adjust it. And there's a certain level of arrogance on my part as the counselor or therapist or doctor to impart what is ultimately going to be possibly a part of my worldview, because I can't just divorce that from saying I have a different view of things from the patient. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. As a matter of fact, I don't want it to be the same. I want it to be unique. But ironically, someone like John is experiencing fear much differently than many other people. His fear is not of the demons or the adversary. His fear is that, what if things go wrong? John isn't a narcissist per se, but he's used to certain results that have allowed him to survive this long. And in a way, I would have to compliment him on that. But I would have to challenge him to the point of realizing that things can be better than they are. Just because things aren't perfect, that doesn't mean that you can let everything just slide and things not get better at any point. And in a way, he's become stuck in that rut. So go back to the basics of cognitive behavioral therapy. What's the B part of A, B, and C? A being the antecedent, what originally triggered this, C being the consequence. John has gotten fantastic at creating the consequence, and everybody can see the antecedent. I'd be really careful about figuring out what his belief is, because similar to the Loki episode, when you are used to constantly manipulating and lying about so many details, you start to lose track of them yourself. So I don't know at any moment what John's true belief is, but I would have to find a way to get him to put me on a similar level to where he has Swamp Thing. In other words, I recognize we may not be lovey-dovey, chummy friends, but you have enough respect that at moments of need, you're willing to say things direct to me. You don't have to do the con job. And that's going to be a pretty difficult situation to be in, because for him to be open enough in that circumstance in the universe, I'm not exactly sure where that environment is, because clearly I don't want to die, so I don't want to go to heaven or hell, at least not yet, even though that probably would be a greater opportunity for him to show me a different side. If there was such a thing as purgatory, maybe I would have to find a way to get him to put me there, because at least that would be quote unquote neutral. And it would be uncomfortable for him, because I want him to have that discomfort. Not in the alleys with the other guys that he hangs out with, not with the demons, not with the angels, just these regular people that have already made their decisions and consequences and are waiting. And now I'm with them, but I'm not done. I'm not satisfied. How can I be in a situation where, quote unquote, I'm supposed to be satisfied, but I'm not? And if he could see that in me and mirror it in some way or challenge me on it, then maybe he would see it within himself. And that does happen sometimes where a therapist will actually try and enact what the patient is doing to see if they can reflect it within themselves. It's not something that I typically do because I'll admit I just have my own style and personality. But with someone like him, I'd be willing to try.
Okay. Now, a lot of what you said is applicable then to an out-of-universe treatment, but I want to see what you would do for an average mortal that does not require the purgatory aspect. What would you do? How would you tweak that?
Right. The good news is the purgatory is my office. That doesn't sound like a compliment, but the point is you have to make sure the patient knows that they're in a non-judgmental environment, because the balance is challenging them to do more than they think they can and get them out of their comfort zone while pointing out this is a great experimental area for that type of thinking. So it's actually simpler. I don't have to worry about how it's going to impact their direct space. I don't have to worry about heaven or hell or anything like that. Having said that, I'll actually make a corollary that I don't always do, but I have to know if the person is truly a person of spirituality or religion. I do have to take that into account because I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want to automatically invoke my own views. This is true for any therapist because a therapist may be atheist. A therapist may be Christian, Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, whatever the case may be. That doesn't have to negatively impact someone of a different religion or even within the same religion having their own questions or thoughts about faith. I bring that up because this character happens to allow for it, but that is a big part of what we do to establish what's important to the person. In other words, if I have someone that's a regular churchgoer and they're having almost an existential crisis of why there's so much negative in the world, I'm going to handle that differently than someone who's been agnostic for the past 20 or 30 years, and that's barely on their radar. But I need to know that, and I need to explore it if necessary. So for a patient, let's say, that is prominent in their church, and there are things that they aren't sure are the right thing for them. It's not my job to tell them to challenge their church. It's my job to help them establish what is important to them. It's up to that person whether or not they agree or disagree with the overarching policies of their particular church and how they want to address it in the future. And also, I have to remind them that regardless of how they do it, if they want to challenge it or if they want to remain more anonymous and make personal changes in their life, that I'm in their corner. I will continue to be in their corner, and it's not my job to shun them, regardless of what my beliefs are. So that's the one wrinkle that I don't think I've ever discussed with just about any other character, actually. So, thank you for John Constantine as a character allowing me to explore spirituality and religion in a therapy session.
Yeah, not too many characters that we've mentioned so far historically have the connections with religion. I know Spawn was a big one that we talked about, heaven and hell. But by and large, these characters exist, certainly not outside of religion, but it's not a core part of who they are or what it is that they deal with. But for Constantine, given the nature of what he does and who he is, it does get tied in. And even in an out-of-universe therapy session, some of these issues do need to be raised and addressed, either by you or the patient. Yeah.
The only other location, I guess, that would be a good choice would probably be Fields of Gold.
Wow. All right. Taking it back to Sting one more time. How long have you been sitting on that one?
No, that was just now.
Okay. All right. Kudos to Off the Dome. Let's head up to Liverpool, which I guess to some, depending on what your soccer fandom is, could be its own version of hell. and let's see what happens when we get John Constantine on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, John. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doc. Do you care for a smoke?
No, thanks. I don't allow smoking in the office.
Right.
I know you're not exactly one for rules, but could you please just humor me here?
Do you have any idea how much stress I'm under? Smoking is one of the purest pleasures I have.
Oh, I'm sure it is. You're not the first. You won't be the last. In fact, I'm not naive enough to tell you to quit. There's plenty of nicotine substitutes, though, and I don't even have to go into the spiel about cancer.
Are you on about that jewel shit? Do I look like a wanker? You'd not catch me dead with one of those things.
Okay, so clearly you have no interest in any part of that category. How about relationships? I know you've had quite a few turn out, let's say, not as well as you'd hoped.
Well, that's an understatement. The problem is in the relationships themselves. It's that my life doesn't lend itself well to them.
That's a bit vague, isn't it? Isn't there anything in particular about your life comparable to anyone else's that makes it so difficult?
Are you on something? You know bloody well what's particular about my life.
Yes, the great warlock, but you don't really publicize that, do you? So is that really what this is about then? I mean, we don't have demons in here right now. It's just you and a stranger trying to see if there's anything that connects the two of us and makes you better.
Not sure why you're interested in making me better. What's in it for you?
Well, typically, this is the part where I ask you if you're on something. I mean, this is what I've made my life's work. It's my training. I want every person that steps into this office to have a better life experience than when they walked in.
Is that what you tell yourself to believe it? How many times you practiced that one?
Well, one of the best parts about this is I didn't have to practice it. At least not that part. There's plenty of other aspects of therapy I still need to improve upon. Okay, for example, trying to understand how you keep up the con man act nonstop. Whenever I try and put on a facade, it lasts for like a really short period of time before I'm exhausted. So I stop bothering. How do you keep going?
Like you said, I didn't have to practice it. Everyone deep down wants to believe what they're being told. So I tell them what I think they want, as long as it gets me what I need.
So, of your own free will, you came here, and while talking to me, you questioned my motives, even though you didn't have to. I'm not that naive, so what do you need from me?
Call it curiosity. I wanted to see what you have to offer. I figure you've been around this long. There must be something to your methods.
Are you hinting that you actually care what I have to say?
I think care is a bit strong. Let's stick with the curiosity.
Fine with me. I'll admit I have some curiosity about you as well. You always try to be one step ahead of the person you're talking to, and that sounds like it would make it difficult to live in the moment. I mean, what kind of conflicts does that create with you and the people you care about?
The kind of conflicts that don't last too long, because inevitably someone walks away. Usually them.
Well, I wonder, does it have to be that way?
I want to say no, but history says otherwise.
So that's what you're chalking it up to, huh? History.
What's that expression you Americans use about walking like a duck?
No, what I mean is, I wouldn't expect you to lay blame on any external factor. You're always the one in control.
It's easier that way.
It's less painful that way.
It depends on who you ask.
I'm asking you.
Believe it or not, Doctor, I don't assume it's all about me. If I have to suffer to protect someone innocent from getting hurt, it's fine. I'm used to it.
Are you now? I'm not sure someone of your capabilities and experiences would be in a spot like this if that were truly the case.
Let me ask you a question, Doc. Have you ever spoken to God?
Knowing you, I guess you mean literally, so no.
I'll tell you something about him. He's not as smart as you think he is, nor as smart as he thinks he is. And yet he's f***ing God. So if that's who's in charge of all of creation in the universe, what about your average bloke? They're just walking the streets minding their own, trying to get by daily. They don't have a clue what's happening around them. They're oblivious. It makes them lucky. I don't have that luxury, but I envy them and I wish I had it. So I tried to keep them there. Doesn't always work out, but more often than not, at least I end up with what I want out of the deal.
I know you've heard the phrase better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, but you've given it a new spin. Better to be stagnant in purgatory than either one. Fascinating. I didn't expect that.
Well, when you're not wanted in heaven or hell, you make the most of it where you can.
Make the most of it? How exactly are you doing that? It sounds like you're making the least of it.
Just doing my best to try and get by like everyone else. I know my situation isn't ideal, but at least it's not boring.
Well, way to set the bar so low you could step over it. Look, I'm not trying to be one of those woo-woo motivational coaches here, You already know most of what I should be saying to you. What gets you out of the doldrums? Because you're putting yourself there. Even though you're saying it's quote-unquote not boring, do you really want all of these relationships to dissolve without any effort?
They say you have to set your standards for happiness low so that you're always surpassing them. As for the doldrums, I find swindling your average demon to put a smile on my face, even if just temporarily.
I'm going to change that a little bit. Even if taking that one extra step so that demon doesn't do any more damage might put you in harm's way, even if you were able to show that you could fight the past and be viewed as a hero at the expense of having to step into the limelight once in a while.
It's more fun to antagonize the demons. They get off on making people miserable. I like to turn the tables on them when I can. You can't really fuck with them from a safe place.
You and I both know that your definition of safe is way different than everyone else's. You're not going to fool me into thinking that what I consider to be uncomfortable is a walk in a park for you. I'm not sure what your reasons remain to stay in that zone other than the fear that you don't want to talk about. But I'll keep throwing out these guesses like I have been this entire time, and I hope at some point you'll take the bait.
Well, that's good for you, Doc. I wouldn't hold my breath.
I keep telling you, I don't allow smoking in here.
I know. This is for when I leave, which is now. Well, at least it seems like the only damage to your office was smoke damage. You can open a window and fix that.
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that. I don't think he really liked me challenging his status quo.
Do any of them really like you challenging the status quo, though?
Touché.
Yeah, nobody likes being challenged, even the good guys. So, something that I want to add in as we're wrapping up, that I completely forgot to mention at the top of the show. I know we had announced in the past couple of weeks that we were going to be doing the monocle, Sir Reginald Hargreaves from the Umbrella Academy this week, and then we were going to be doing Constantine next week. I completely forgot to mention, we shifted this up a little bit. Our brand new president level patron Ariel has requested for April that we do Talia al Ghul, but as previously mentioned, we're going to be taking a little hiatus in April because my son will be born in the beginning of the month. And so before we went on hiatus, we wanted to make sure that we squeezed in Ariel's request. So we opted to shift up Constantine. We're going to do Talia al Ghul next week, and that's going to be sort of the season finale for our little mini hiatus. And then when we come back, we can always do the monocle Sir Reginald Hargreaves from the Umbrella Academy. Plus, it'll give us a little more time. We can watch the show. We can read some of the books and get us a little better acclimated to the character.
I agree. So
just in case you were wondering, and I'll make sure to put this in the show notes and on social media as to why we shifted Constantine up a week. But so as we just said, next week is going to be Talia al Ghul, and that is going to be our season finale for a couple of weeks. So as always, you can find our shows on capesonthecouch.live. We are available through pretty much all of your major podcast providers. You can find us on the social media pages at Capes on the Couch, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. You can email us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com if you have any questions or comments about our episodes. And you can subscribe to our Patreon page like Ariel. You can go to patreon.com/capesonthecouch and subscribe at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels. Or you can't subscribe at the $10 levels anymore. Those spots have been sold out. So you can still subscribe at the $1, $3, and $5 levels and get some fantastic additional content. So I guess that's about it for Constantine, other than don't smoke. That would be my comment of the week. I'm sorry, Doc, if I'm stealing your thunder. I know you usually have your inspirational thing that you like to say, but do you have anything that you want to add before we leave?
There's nothing magical about self-improvement.
I thought it was going to be another police reference, so I'll be grateful that it was at least applicable to the episode.
Oh, believe me, I had in the back of my head, why on earth would anyone say every breath you take and make that the premise of a song? Don't encourage stalking.
Yeah.
They're the police, for crying out loud.
Boom. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.